Today, we are diving into a really fascinating and honestly a slightly unsettling mental glitch that gets every single one of us. It's called the illusion of understanding. You know that feeling, right? That amazing aha moment where a super complex idea just clicks and everything suddenly feels crystal clear. And then, maybe a day later, maybe just a few minutes later, it completely falls apart the second you try to explain it to someone else. Yeah, that is the mystery we are unpacking today. So, let's walk through a classic example. Picture this. You're watching one of those slick online videos about a big, complicated topic, let's say inflation. The person explaining it is super confident, the graphics are amazing, and everything is broken down into these simple, perfect metaphors.
And by the time those 10 minutes are up, you feel awesome. You feel like you've conquered inflation. If someone were to ask you, hey, do you understand that? You'd be like, oh yeah, absolutely.
But then comes the real test. A few days go by and a friend just happens to ask you about it. You think, okay, cool, I got this, no problem. You start talking and you find yourself just repeating some of the phrases you heard in the video, but something feels hollow. The dots don't connect. That clean, stable machine you saw in your head now feels wobbly and insecure. And that amazing feeling of confidence, it just evaporates.
So what is going on here? This whole experience points to the central mystery we're looking at, that huge gap between the feeling of understanding something and actually understanding it.
And there's a name for this. Psychologists call it the illusion of understanding. It's that tricky, deceptive space between believing you know something and having the real structured knowledge to build it back up from scratch for someone else. And listen, this isn't just about big, abstract topics like economics. Think about this for a second. Could you, right now, draw a step-by-step diagram of how a zipper actually works, or a toilet, or how a search engine decides what to show you first? We use these things every single day so they feel obvious, until we're actually forced to explain the mechanics. Okay, so what's the prime suspect behind this whole illusion? Well, it all comes down to a fundamental mix-up our brain makes constantly, between two very, very different ways of thinking. The whole problem really boils down to this difference right here. Recognition is passive. It just asks, have I seen this before? And it runs on a feeling of familiarity. But explanation, that's active. It asks a much tougher question. Can I actually reconstruct how this whole thing works? That requires building a mental model from the ground up. And way too often, our brain mistakes the warm, easy feeling of familiarity for the hard work of reconstruction. But, this isn't just a simple mistake. There are some really powerful hidden forces at play that make this illusion feel so incredibly real and convincing.
First off, our brains are basically built to be efficient. You could even say they're lazy, but in a smart way. They practice cognitive efficiency. They take a messy, complex world and compress it into simple stories to save energy. Second, there's emotional comfort. That aha moment feels good. It's a relief from the stress of not knowing. And third, there's a social reason. In most conversations, let's be honest, we get rewarded for sounding confident, not for being 100% accurate down to the last detail.
So, okay, this is just how our brains work. What's the big deal? Well, the problem is that this convenient little shortcut can seriously break down and cause real problems when reality decides to call our bluff.
This illusion gets shattered under three main conditions. First, pretty obviously, is when we're actually required to explain something step by step. Our confidence just nosedives. Second, it's when we need to predict what will happen next in a new situation. A shallow story just doesn't give you the tools for that. And third, and this is the important one, is when the stakes get high, in our finances, our health, or in public policy. Acting on an illusion of understanding there can lead to some really terrible decisions. And this all brings us to the formal, scientific term for this whole phenomenon, the illusion of explanatory depth. It's that very specific feeling of overestimating our own knowledge, this bubble of confidence that pops the instant someone asks, so how does that actually work?
So how do we tie all these pieces together? Let's build a powerful little mental model that really shows what's happening inside our minds when this illusion takes hold.
At the very heart of this is a constant, invisible tug-of-war happening inside your brain between two forces, simplicity and fidelity. Simplicity wants to shrink everything down so it's quick and easy to use. Fidelity, on the other hand, wants to preserve all the messy, complicated details of reality. The illusion of understanding is basically what happens when simplicity wins that fight a little too easily.
Think of your mind as having a kind of compression chamber. So first, the raw data goes in. That's all the messy, chaotic, interconnected information from the real world.
Then, once it's inside that chamber, the real work starts. The complex machinery gets smoothed out, all the tricky variables are simplified, and a nice, neat, clean story is built to replace that tangled mess of reality.
And finally, what pops out the other side is like a perfectly compressed file. It's a story that's clear, satisfying, and super easy to share. And it feels like understanding precisely because all the difficult, confusing parts have been edited out. And that leads us to the single most important takeaway from all of this. That sudden feeling of perfect clarity. It isn't always a sign of deep understanding. It might just be the sound of your mind's compression software finishing its job.
So I'll leave you with a question to chew on. Whether it's about politics or technology, or maybe even a personal relationship, what complex reality in your life have you compressed into a simple, easy story? And what might you discover if you actually tried to explain it piece by piece?